His wife said, "I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. You'll never recover from this." Those were the last words Katherine Walsh screamed at her husband before slamming the door and driving away with everything they'd built together. She had no idea that the broken man she left behind would rise from the ashes and build an empire that would make her greatest achievements look like participation trophies. What happened next will change everything you think you know about recovery, revenge, and the true cost of underestimating someone who has nothing left to lose. Viewers, have you ever been told you were nothing without someone? That you'd never make it on your own? What would you do if life gave you the chance to prove them devastatingly wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more incredible stories. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Walsh Marketing Solutions had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Boston. Daniel Walsh sat at the head of the table, reviewing quarterly reports while his business partner and wife Katherine paced near the windows, her heels clicking against the marble floor with increasing agitation. "We need to talk," she said, not turning around. Daniel looked up from the spreadsheet. "About the Henderson account? I thought we agreed to pitch them the integrated campaign, not about work." Katherine finally faced him, her expression cold and calculated. She looked immaculate as always, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun, her navy suit tailored to perfection. "About us." Something in her tone made Daniel's stomach tighten. He closed the laptop slowly. "What about us? I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel felt the room shift slightly, the way the ground moves during an earthquake, subtle at first, then devastating. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "We just celebrated our 10th anniversary last month." Katherine laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's exactly the problem, Daniel. 10 years of mediocrity, 10 years of watching you play it safe while I built this company into something real." "We built this company," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "Together, from that tiny office in Cambridge. I built this company." Katherine's eyes flashed with contempt. "You were there, sure. You made the spreadsheets. You organized the files. You kept everything running smoothly in the background. But I was the one bringing in clients. I was the one making the pitches that mattered. I was the one with the vision." Daniel stood slowly, trying to process what he was hearing. "Katherine, where is this coming from? We're partners in everything." "That's another problem." She walked to her desk and pulled out a manila folder. "I've been thinking about this for months." "You're holding me back, Daniel. Your cautious approach, your risk-averse mentality, your need to analyze everything to death before making a decision. It's suffocating." She slid the folder across the table. Daniel opened it with trembling fingers. Divorce papers, already signed by her attorney. "I've also prepared the buyout papers," Katherine continued, her tone businesslike now. "You'll receive 20% of the company's current valuation. That's more than fair considering your actual contribution." 20%? Daniel's voice rose for the first time. "I helped start this company. I put in the same hours, the same money, the same everything." "You put in money, yes. Your father's money, if I recall correctly. The $50,000 loan that you keep mentioning like it was some heroic sacrifice." Katherine's smile was cruel. "I turned that into a $15 million company, Daniel. Me. My contacts, my strategies, my pitches. Our contacts, our strategies. Keep telling yourself that." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and I'll need you out of the house by the end of the week. It's in my name, as you'll remember. My father gave us the down payment as a wedding gift to me specifically." Daniel felt something break inside him, not his heart that had shattered the moment she said she wanted a divorce, but something deeper. His sense of reality, his understanding of the last 10 years of his life. "Katherine, please, can we just talk about this? Go to counseling? Whatever this is, we can work through it." She looked at him with something close to pity. "There's nothing to work through, Daniel. I've outgrown you. I need someone who matches my ambition, my drive, my vision for what life should be." "Someone like Richard?" The words came out before Daniel could stop them. Catherine's expression didn't change. Richard understands what it takes to build something extraordinary. He doesn't question every decision or spend hours creating contingency plans for problems that might never happen. He acts, he leads, he wins. Richard Morrison, senior partner at Morrison & Associates, the biggest advertising firm in New England. Daniel had met him at industry events, watched him and Katherine talk with an ease that now made sickening sense. "How long?" Daniel asked quietly. "Does it matter?" "How long, Katherine?" she sighed, impatient now. 8 months. And before you spiral into some dramatic victim narrative, nothing physical happened until I made my decision about us. I'm not a cheater, Daniel. I'm just someone who recognizes when something isn't working. 8 months. While he'd been working late to finish the Henderson proposal, she'd been building a future that didn't include him. While he'd been planning their anniversary trip to Vermont, she'd been planning her escape. "Sign the papers," Katherine said, her hand on the door handle. "My attorney will handle everything. You'll get you 20%, which is honestly generous." "And Daniel?" She paused, her final words delivered with devastating precision. "I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. You'll never recover from this. You were average before me, and you'll be average after me. The only reason you got anywhere in life was because I pulled you along." The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt like the end of the world. Daniel stood alone in the conference room, staring at the divorce papers, at the buyout agreement that would strip him of everything he'd built. The company they'd started in a cramped Cambridge office, fueled by takeout coffee and shared dreams. The brand they'd grown through late nights and early mornings. The clients they'd won together. Except it wasn't together, was it? Not according to Katherine. According to her version of history, he'd been dead weight the entire time. A supporting character in her success story. He signed the papers that evening, sitting in the dark office after everyone else had gone home. 20% of $15 million was $3 million. Enough to start over, enough to rebuild. But the money wasn't what hurt. The money was just numbers on a page. What hurt was the realization that the woman he'd loved for 12 years, married for 10, built a life with, saw him as nothing more than an obstacle she'd finally decided to remove. Daniel packed his office the next morning before dawn. His desk, his files, his photographs, everything that made the space his. Katherine wasn't there yet. She never came in before 9. He left his key card on her desk with a note that said simply, "Good luck." He didn't mean it. The apartment Daniel rented was in a neighborhood he'd never considered before, far from the gleaming towers of downtown Boston. It was small, furnished with second-hand furniture from Craigslist, with windows that looked out onto a busy street instead of the harbor view he'd grown accustomed to. His father called 3 days after Daniel moved in. "Your mother and I heard about the divorce," Thomas Walsh said, his voice careful. "We want you to know we're here for you, son." "I'm fine, Dad. Katherine called us yesterday. She said you're having trouble accepting the separation." Daniel closed his eyes, pressing his phone against his ear. "What exactly did she say?" "That you're not handling it well. That she's worried about you." A pause. "She also mentioned that you left the company without fulfilling your obligations. Said she had to scramble to cover your accounts." "I left the company because she bought me out, Dad. I don't have any accounts there anymore." She made it sound different. Of course she did. Katherine was already rewriting history, already painting herself as the victim of his instability instead of the architect of his destruction. "I'm fine," Daniel repeated. "Really, I just need some time to figure things out." "Your mother wants you to come to dinner Sunday. I'll think about it." He didn't go to dinner Sunday. He couldn't face the questions, the sympathy, the unspoken judgment. Instead, he sat in his small apartment, surrounded by boxes he hadn't unpacked, and made a list. "Things I'm good at," he wrote at the top. Then he stared at the blank page, Katherine's words echoing in his mind. Average, mediocre, dead weight. The pen moved slowly at first, then faster. Data analysis, strategy development, client relationship management, market research, financial modeling, problem solving, crisis management. The list grew, and as it grew, something shifted inside him. Katherine had been right about one thing. He was cautious. He did analyze every angle before making a decision. He did create contingency plans for problems that might never happen, but those weren't weaknesses. Those were strengths she'd used for 10 years and then discarded when she decided she didn't need them anymore. Daniel opened his laptop and started researching. The marketing industry had changed since they'd started Walsh Marketing Solutions. Digital analytics, artificial intelligence, predictive modeling, these were the tools shaping the future of advertising. Tools that required exactly the kind of analytical thinking Katherine dismissed as overthinking. For the first time in 3 weeks, Daniel smiled. 6 months later, Daniel stood in a small office space in Cambridge, not far from where he and Katherine had started their first company. The rent was cheap, the furniture was minimal, and the team consisted of exactly one person, him. Walsh Analytics launched on a Tuesday morning with a website, a LinkedIn page, and a single client, a struggling e-commerce company that needed help understanding why their conversion rates had dropped. Daniel spent 3 days analyzing their data, building models, testing hypotheses. When he presented his findings, the client stared at the projections in disbelief. "You're telling me that if we adjust our email timing by 2 hours and change our landing page layout, we could increase conversions by 35%? Based on the data, yes. But I'd recommend testing it with a small segment first." They tested it. Conversions increased by 42%. Word spread. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. Daniel took on a second client, then a third. Each project reinforced what he'd begun to suspect. The analytical skills Katherine had dismissed as boring were exactly what companies desperately needed in an increasingly data-driven world. By month 9, he hired his first employee, Emily Rodriguez, a data scientist fresh out of MIT with ideas that made his head spin. By month 12, the team had grown to 5. By month 18, they'd moved to a larger office and were turning down clients because they couldn't keep up with demand. Daniel didn't think about Katherine much during this time. He was too busy building, too focused on proving something to himself if not to her. But occasionally, late at night when he was reviewing projections or analyzing market trends, her voice would creep in. "Average, mediocre, you'll never recover." 2 years after the divorce, Walsh Analytics had 23 employees and annual revenue of $8 million. They'd developed a proprietary algorithm that could predict consumer behavior with unprecedented accuracy. Companies were lining up to license it. Daniel received the message on a Wednesday afternoon. Richard Morrison wanted to meet. They agreed on a neutral location, a coffee shop in downtown Boston halfway between their respective offices. Richard arrived exactly on time, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Daniel's first car. "Thank you for meeting me," Richard said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his smile practiced. "I know this must be awkward." Daniel ordered black coffee and sat across from the man who'd helped destroy his marriage. "What can I do for you, Richard? I'll get straight to the point. Morrison and Associates wants to acquire Walsh Analytics." Daniel said nothing, just waited. "Your algorithm is revolutionary," Richard continued. "The predictive modeling, the behavioral analysis, it's exactly what our clients need. We're prepared to offer $25 million for full acquisition, with you staying on as Chief Analytics Officer." "That's generous. It's fair market value. Your company is worth that, potentially more." Richard leaned forward. "Katherine doesn't know I'm here. This would be a professional decision separate from our personal relationship." "How is she?" Daniel asked, the question surprising him as much as it seemed to surprise Richard. "She's good. Thriving, actually. We got married 6 months ago." The news should have hurt, but it didn't. That surprised Daniel most of all. The woman who declared herself the best thing that ever happened to him felt like a stranger now. "Congratulations," Daniel said, meaning it. "She's built Walsh Marketing Solutions into something impressive," Richard continued. "Revenue's up 40% since you left. She really hit her stride once she had full control." "I'm glad," Richard studied him carefully. "You're not angry." "I was. For a long time, I was furious." Daniel took a sip of coffee. But somewhere along the way, I realized she did me a favor. I never would have built Walsh Analytics if I'd stayed comfortable. So you'll consider the offer? No. Richard blinked. No. Walsh Analytics isn't for sale. Not at 25 million, not at any price. I didn't build it to sell it. I built it because I finally figured out who I am when I'm not trying to be what someone else needs me to be. That's a mistake, Richard said, his tone hardening. You're letting emotion cloud business judgment. 25 million is more than fair. It's not about the money. Then, what's it about? Daniel stood, leaving cash on the table for his untouched coffee. It's about knowing my worth, Richard. Something I forgot for a long time. Thank you for the offer, but the answer is no. As he walked away, he felt something lift from his shoulders. The last weight of the past, the last shadow of Katherine's words. Average, mediocre, you'll never recover. He'd recovered just fine. The Boston Business Journal ran the story on a Thursday morning, 3 years after the divorce. Walsh Analytics secures $75 million funding round, valued at $250 million. Daniel's phone exploded with calls and messages. Investors, clients, reporters, everyone wanting a piece of the success story. But the message he noticed came late in the afternoon, from a number he didn't recognize. We need to talk, please. Katherine. He deleted it without responding. Then he gathered his team for the celebration they'd planned, pizza and champagne in the office that now occupied 3 floors of a converted warehouse in Cambridge. Emily raised her glass. To Daniel for seeing what the rest of the industry missed. To all of you, Daniel corrected, for taking a chance on a divorced guy with a laptop and a theory. The laughter felt good. The success felt better. But best of all was the quiet certainty that he'd built this himself. Not in spite of Katherine's abandonment, but because of it. She'd torn away everything he thought defined him, and in doing so, forced him to discover what actually did. 2 days later, Katherine showed up at his office. Daniel's assistant buzzed him. There's a Katherine Walsh Morrison here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. He considered saying no, considered letting her sit in the waiting area and experience the rejection she'd given him so casually 3 years earlier, but curiosity won. Send her in. Katherine looked older, still beautiful, still impeccably dressed, but there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, tension in her shoulders that suggested sleepless nights. Your office is impressive, she said, looking around at the space filled with whiteboards covered in equations, monitors displaying real-time data analytics, the controlled chaos of innovation. Thank you for seeing me. You said it was important. She sat across from him, and for a moment she was quiet. Then I read the article. 250 million. That's incredible. We're proud of what we've built. Daniel, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Her voice cracked slightly. Leaving you, selling the company, all of it. I've been miserable. I'm sorry to hear that. Richard and I are divorcing. It's not working. He's not who I thought he was. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying the woman he'd once loved more than anything. Katherine, why are you here? Because I want to fix what I broke. I want us to try again. She reached across the desk, her hand stopping just short of his. We were good together, Daniel. We built something incredible once. We could do it again. We were good together, Daniel agreed. But I wasn't good enough for you, remember? I was average, mediocre, dead weight holding you back. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Tears formed in her eyes, real ones. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was chasing something that didn't exist. Success, recognition, proving something to everyone who ever doubted me. And I lost the only thing that actually mattered. What about Walsh Marketing Solutions? Katherine's expression darkened. Revenues down 38% year over year. We lost the Henderson account, the Morrison Group contract, most of our major clients. Turns out Richard was more interested in my company than me. Once we got married, he started redirecting our clients to Morrison and Associates. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. I'm sorry. Are you? She looked at him carefully. You should be celebrating. I destroyed your life, and karma finally caught up to me. I'm not the same person you divorced, Katherine. That Daniel would have wanted revenge. This Daniel just wants you to be okay. I'm not okay. I'm drowning. The company's failing. My marriage is over, and I have nothing left. Nothing except the realization that I destroyed the only real thing I ever had. She stood, walking to the window that overlooked Cambridge. You told me once that we were partners, that we built everything together. I spent 3 years believing I did it alone, that your contribution didn't matter. But Walsh Marketing Solutions is falling apart, and I finally understand why. Why? Because I was never the only talented one. I was just the louder one. You were the foundation, Daniel. The strategy, the planning, the analysis that made my pitches actually work. I was so busy taking credit for the wins that I forgot who made them possible. She turned back to face him. I need you. Not your money, not your company. You. The way we used to be. The way we could be again. Daniel stood, moving to stand beside her at the window. Below them, Cambridge bustled with life. Students hurrying to class, professionals rushing to meetings, everyone moving with purpose toward whatever future they were building. Do you remember what you said to me 3 years ago? Daniel asked quietly. You said you were the best thing that ever happened to me, that I'd never recover. I was cruel. I was stupid. You were right about one thing. You were the best thing that happened to me, not because you made me better, but because you made me find out who I actually was. He turned to look at her. I'm grateful for that, Katherine, genuinely, but I'm also done. Please, don't say that. We can rebuild. I know we can. No, we can't. Because I'm not the same person anymore, and honestly, neither are you. The Katherine I married was ambitious but kind, driven but fair. Somewhere along the way, you became someone who measured people's worth by their value to your success. I don't think you even realize you're still doing it. That's not fair, isn't it? You didn't come here because you miss me. You came here because you're failing, and you need someone to fix it, just like I used to fix things. But I'm not your problem solver anymore, Katherine. I'm not your backup plan. Tears streamed down her face now. I loved you. I still love you. You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference. Daniel moved back to his desk, the distance between them feeling both necessary and final. I hope you figure things out. I really do. But not with me. So that's it? 3 years, and you don't even want to try? I tried for 10 years, Katherine. I tried to be enough for you. It took me a long time to realize I was always enough. You just couldn't see it. Katherine stood there for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of weakness, any crack she could exploit. But Daniel had spent 3 years rebuilding himself into someone who didn't need her validation anymore. I have a meeting in 10 minutes, he said gently. I'm sorry, but I need you to leave. She walked to the door, then paused. You've changed. I know. I don't like it. I know that too. The door closed behind her, and Daniel returned to his desk, his hands steady, his mind clear. His assistant buzzed. Your 2 o'clock is here. Emily says the new algorithm is ready for testing. Send them in. Life went on. It always did. The difference was that now, Daniel was building a life on his own terms, measured by his own definition of success, driven by his own dreams instead of someone else's vision of who he should be. Katherine Walsh Morrison had been right about one thing. He'd never recovered from their divorce. Because recovery implied returning to what was before, Daniel hadn't gone back. He'd gone forward into a version of himself that was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more valuable than anything he'd been when they were together. Sometimes the best thing that happens to you is being forced to prove you are worth something all along. 3 months after Katherine's visit, Daniel stood on stage at the Tech Innovation Conference in San Francisco. Behind him, screens displayed Walsh Analytics' newest product, an AI-driven platform that could predict consumer trends with 93% accuracy. The future of marketing isn't louder ads or flashier campaigns, he told the audience of 2,000 industry professionals. It's understanding human behavior at a fundamental level. It's using data not to manipulate, but to genuinely serve what people need before they even know they need it. The applause was thunderous. After his presentation, investors lined up to talk. Media wanted interviews, competitors wanted partnerships, but the moment that mattered came later, in a quiet conversation with Emily over coffee in the hotel lobby. "You know what's funny?" Emily said. "Everyone keeps asking me what it's like to work for a genius. And I keep telling them, you're not a genius. You're just someone who actually listens to what the data says instead of what they want it to say." Daniel laughed. "That's probably the best compliment I've ever received." Walsh Marketing Solutions filed for bankruptcy last week, Emily mentioned casually. It was in the trades. He'd seen the announcement, felt a moment of sadness for what had once been, then moved on. Katherine had made her choices. He'd made his. They'd each gotten exactly what they deserved. "You never talk about her," Emily observed. "There's nothing to say. She's part of my past. An important part, because she taught me what I didn't want to be. But still just the past. For what it's worth, I think she was an idiot." She wasn't an idiot. She was just so focused on being extraordinary that she forgot the value of being steady, of being reliable, of being the person who shows up and does the work even when it's not glamorous. Emily raised her coffee cup. "To being steady." "To being steady," Daniel agreed. That night, alone in his hotel room, Daniel did something he hadn't done in years. He pulled out the box of photographs he'd kept from his marriage. Pictures of him and Katherine at their wedding, at company parties, at the beach house they'd rented one summer. They looked happy. They probably were happy, at least for a while. Before ambition became more important than partnership, before success became the only measure of worth, he didn't throw the photos away. Instead, he packed them carefully back in the box and put them in storage. Not as punishment, not as revenge, but as a reminder. The past had shaped him, but it didn't define him anymore. His phone buzzed. A message from Jennifer, the woman he'd been seeing for the past 4 months. Smart, independent, a professor at Boston University who understood driven people because she was one herself. "How was the presentation?" "It went well. I'll tell you about it when I get home. Looking forward to it. Proud of you." Simple words. But they carried a weight that Katherine's grand declarations never had. Because Jennifer was proud of him, not for what he could do for her, but for what he was becoming on his own. And that, Daniel realized, was the real measure of recovery. Not wealth, not success, not even happiness. Just the quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly who he was supposed to be with, building exactly the life he wanted to build. Katherine had been wrong. He had recovered. But more than that, he'd transcended. He'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to him and used it as the foundation for the best thing he'd ever built, himself. 5 years after the divorce, Walsh Analytics went public. The opening stock price valued the company at $1.2 billion. Daniel retained controlling interest, but distributed significant equity to his employees, making 17 of them millionaires overnight. The celebration party was held on a rooftop in downtown Boston. Music played, champagne flowed, and people who'd taken a chance on a broken divorcee with a laptop celebrated the rewards of believing in potential over appearances. Daniel stood at the railing, looking out over the city lights. Behind him, his team laughed and danced. Beside him, Jennifer slipped her hand into his. "Quite a view," she said. "It really is." "Katherine sent me a message on LinkedIn," Jennifer mentioned, "congratulating us on the IPO. That was nice of her. She also asked if I'd pass along a message to you." "What message?" "That she was sorry. That she'd spent 5 years learning the difference between being successful and being significant. That you'd always been the significant one." Daniel thought about that for a moment. "Do you think she means it? Does it matter?" "No," he said, surprising himself with how true that felt. "No, it doesn't." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city that had witnessed both his destruction and his resurrection. Somewhere out there, Katherine was building whatever came next for her. He hoped it brought her peace. He hoped she found what she was actually looking for. But mostly, he just didn't think about it much anymore. Ready to head inside? Jennifer asked. Emily wants to make a toast. Let's hear what she has to say. As they walked back toward the party, toward the people who'd helped him build something extraordinary from the ruins of something ordinary, Daniel realized the truth Katherine never understood. Recovery wasn't about returning to who you were before. It was about discovering who you'd been meant to become all along. And sometimes the person who breaks you is really just clearing the way for the person who'll help you become whole. He'd never thanked Katherine for leaving. But in a strange way, her departure had been the greatest gift she could have given him. The gift of necessity. The gift of having no choice but to figure out who he actually was when no one else was defining him. She'd been right. He'd never recovered from their divorce. He'd done something far better. He'd transformed because of it. And in the end, that was a kind of revenge Katherine would never understand. The revenge of actually being happy, of building a life so complete that her absence became invisible, of proving that the best thing that ever happened to him wasn't her at all. It was learning to be enough, all on his own. The music swelled. The champagne sparkled. The city lights reflected off the glasses raised in celebration. And Daniel Walsh, no longer the man Katherine had dismissed as average, stepped back into his extraordinary life without looking back. Because some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. Not because you're bitter, not because you're angry, but because you've built something so much better on the other side that returning would only diminish what you've become. Katherine had said he'd never recover. She'd been absolutely right. Recovery would have been settling for getting back what he lost. Daniel had done something infinitely better. He'd discovered what was possible when you stop trying to recover and start learning to rebuild from the foundation up. And in that rebuilding, he'd found not just success, but significance. Not just wealth, but worth. Not just recovery, but resurrection. The Katherine who'd walked away 5 years ago had unknowingly set him free to become the Daniel he was always meant to be, the one who didn't need anyone to believe in him because he'd finally learned to believe in himself. That was the ultimate victory. Not money, not fame, not even the satisfaction of proving her wrong. Just the quiet, powerful knowledge that he'd become someone who didn't need her validation anymore, because he'd found something far more valuable, his own. Viewers, if you were Daniel, would you have given Katherine a second chance? Do you think recovery is about rebuilding what you lost or discovering something new? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more powerful, true-to-life stories about resilience, redemption, and the strength that comes from refusing to stay down when life knocks you flat.